Sonya Massey, um, yet another victim of another police shooting in America and culture today. And it just kind of continues to happen. And we're here to unpack it and undress it. Let's talk about it in a very raw, unfiltered way, because this is a very serious conversation. I think continues to peel back layers of perhaps what seems to be obvious, but yet continues to be swept under the rug in some ways, while also trying to learn how to navigate situations like this, of course, from a faith base, but more importantly, from a human perspective of everything that's going on around us. So, Sonya Massey, I believe she was 36 years old. She was calling the police at the point of calling them for an intruder, ended up being the one dead in such a situation. So, the 36-minute video released via the Illinois State Police includes body cam footage from each of the two Sangamon County Sheriff's deputies who responded to Massey's house after midnight on July 6th after Massey called 911 to report a possible prowler at her home in Springfield, according to a court document filed by prosecutors. And so we kind of have a little bit of some transcripts of what was said, what was shared. In the footage, Deputy Sean Grayson and another deputy speak calmly with Massey in her home when she goes to the stove to turn off a pot of boiling water. She then picks up the pot and the other deputy steps back away from your hot steaming water. And she says this line, "I rebuke you in the name of Jesus." And he says, "Huh? I rebuke you in the name of Jesus." She repeats, "You better effing not, or I swear to God, I will effing shoot you in the effing face." Grayson says, then he then draws his firearm, points it at her, and she ducks and says, "I'm sorry," while lifting the pot. The video shows, "Drop your pot." 3 shots are heard. After a few seconds of silence, when deputies says shots fired, calls for emergency medical services. And this was his response: "Dude, I'm not taking effing boiling water to the effing head. And look, it came right to our feet too." So really sad things, man. And just something enough of it to really just unpack for a second. So I kind of want to just open this up to you, PD, man. If you have any thoughts opening up to this.
So, hey, listen, the first thing I want to say, Sean, about this truthfully is it's a tragedy. And some of you who might watch this might be thinking to yourself, man, I'm exhausted by this. I've heard enough about it. So what do we have to lend to it? Well, there's a couple of things I want you to think. We come from a Christian worldview, so we spring forth from the Bible, right? And so our focus today, or my focus, I should say, specifically, is going to be more around human beings seeing other human beings, is what I want to really kind of focus on here. And the reason why I say that is I can talk about the police officer, and I will. I could talk about Miss Massey, and I will. I could also talk about what has taken place in this culture, especially more and more over the last several years with the rise of unarmed, specifically African-American people, mostly male. There has been the Sandra Bland's, of course, now Sonya Massey, the other young lady also too, who was in her apartment. I believe that was in Kentucky. And so, you know, who was murdered by the police. The first thing I want to say, Sean, is this. What you just read was a clip from CNN. I personally don't ascribe to CNN, MSNBC, Fox, any of the other news channels. And I'm going to tell you why. And then I'm going to answer your question. You're either left or you're right, or you're far right or you're far left or you're moderate. The news people are going to give you enough information that's going to fit the narrative that they want to shape around the story. And so I'm careful about that. The other thing I want to tell you is, before I answer it, is I'm going to be very careful about answering specifics because I don't know the specifics. I wasn't there. I also think that police departments only release to you what police departments want to release to you. I think they're oftentimes very limited in what they're willing to share with us. Once again, because they too, law enforcement, historically has been known to protect their own, even in very egregious acts. and things along those lines. And so the reality is that I don't have all of the information. Sean, is what it boils down to. What I have is a video that's clearly seen as somebody who is unarmed. Even if you have a pot of water, even if you have a boiling pot of water. I'm not a law enforcement agent, by the way. And so I do have friends that are there. I'm not interested in the whole back to blue. I'm not interested in any of those political ideologies. Here's the deal. I think police officers have a job to do. And I think that some police officers do their job very well, and some police officers suck at doing their job. In that process, some people have been harmed, hurt, and or killed by unhinged police officers. Police officers, too, we also know, it's been documented, have issues with racism. And how these people get passed to become police officers to say they're going to serve the public is very interesting. We also know that there has been corruption. I think there's corruption in the world anyway, especially when it comes to dealing with the human heart and the fallen nature of man, right? So I want to say all of those things before I attempt to share with you what my thoughts are. First and foremost, my heart goes out to the Massey family and to those that are connected to her, because it's a senseless loss. Once again, I'm not a police officer, so I don't understand all police protocols. But what I do believe is that if you have a woman who called you for help and she ends up dead in your authorities, clearly that's something, Sean, that is not something that we could just look at, take lightly, and be like, oh, well, stuff happens, things along those lines. A bad situation turned worse. I think it's deeper than that. To be honest with you, I'm thinking too, I oftentimes think to myself, why would you have a kill shot if you really thought too that you were in danger, when you have this person's full body in view, where you can simply disable them by shooting them in some other region of their body, or not shooting them at all, especially if there wasn't a weapon that was brandished. And it looks like from the video, she was far enough away. But with all of that being said, my challenge is this. I am going to share this with you as a Black man in America. I find it incredibly challenging that we have, over the course again of these last several years, Sean, continued to see unarmed Black people running away from white people in particular, who have been shot. And now some of these people have been called into account, right? Even the George Floyd thing. There are people who still, mostly white people that I know, who will tell you, hey, it's standard protocol. He was a criminal anyway, different things along those lines, which is why I said that my focus today, we wanted to be more on the life, the human aspect of these people, because somehow, some way, Sean, what has crept into our 2024 culture is this idea that lives don't matter, Black or otherwise, lives don't matter, and that the image of God can be destroyed at any moment by anyone who feels led to do so. And I don't feel like that we're looking at people as human beings. It takes me back to a lot of the really, again, dangerous and poor history that we've had in this country, man, from slavery on to the fact that, again, for those of you who don't know history and you're like, this stuff don't bother me. Sean and I were on another platform where we were having a conversation like this, and people weren't necessarily kind of feeling what I had to say in some instances, not all, in some instances, because they were struggling with the fact that I was like, listen, this stuff is real. It comes along where they're like, no, some of my best friends are white, or, whatever. Some of my best friends are Black. That's not what we're talking about. I am talking about the ability, Sean, for us to see one another as human beings, and understand the history behind why someone would be so upset about a situation that we currently have here with Miss Massey. This has been going on far too long. Far too many innocent people have lost their lives. Far too many innocent Black people have lost their lives to police violence, right? Absolute police neglect. And you start to speak about it, and sadly, there's a few people. There's a police officer dude who's on YouTube. I can't remember his name, but he actually is from my area. He lives back in Dallas, or at least he went to college in my area. He lives back in Houston or Dallas somewhere out there, where, you know, he's been like, oh, you know, here you go, you Black people again with this, that, and the other violence and so on and so forth. Hey, man, these
Officer
things have
Tatum?
been. I believe it is. I believe it is. These things have been going on for a long, long time, man. And so I'm always too like he'll make comments about statistics and different things along those lines. I want to talk to you about more of the human factor, about who has a right to take another person's life just because they feel led to. Or again, we've seen these really egregious videos from the guy who was jogging too, right? And who was just jogging through a community, and two white men said, hey, you know what? You don't belong here. And him trying to get away from him was enough for them to say, we need to execute this dude. And that's what they did, right? They executed him. And so, you know, and even during the court proceedings, I just didn't see, Sean, the remorse of taking another person's life. I didn't see that level of remorse. I didn't see the difficulty of, you realize that you're unaliving somebody, like you're legitimately unaliving everything about them, their history, everything. And that moment is gone. And the idea that you can just do that, just cold-bloodedly, man, without even thinking, Sean, about it is tragic, man, on so many different levels. One of the realities of this whole thing is this right here. Listen, I live in a suburb that's predominantly white. Some people might think I'm over the top for this statement, but you know what, man? When all that stuff started happening, I went out and I bought myself a really nice, very expensive car camera, front and back. So it shows you what's going on in my car, and it shows you what's going on outside of my car. It keeps the speed, it keeps all of that stuff, and it also records directly to my home computer. So when my car starts, it starts, and my whole journey, wherever I am, it tells you that. It shows you everything that's going on in my car. Why? Because I need it to. Because I need it to. Sean, I walk in the morning about sometimes 2 miles, sometimes 3. I did 3 this morning. Just depends on what I have to do. But I for sure get in 2. And I walk in the morning, man, in my community. Don't get me wrong. There's some of us sprinkled around here for sure. But when I walk in the morning, I have to do something that the majority of my neighbors do not have to do. And that is, I have to walk with my wallet. So I have to walk with my wallet, Sean, because I have to be able to let people know that this is actually my address and I actually live here. Like real talk, like I live here. So I'm more interested in how we view one another, Sean, and why we are not viewing another person as somebody's son, as somebody's daughter, somebody's mother, somebody's aunt, somebody's uncle, somebody's cousin, somebody's friend, somebody's neighbor, somebody's loved one. We have taken the human aspect out of it, man. We're not looking at people in the same way. And that's evident too by the remarks that people give when we start having conversations around this. The cold-heartedness of people isn't. I mean, I'm gonna be honest with you, man. And some of these people will claim that they know God. Some of these people will claim to be Christians. Some of these people are like, you know, if you weren't this, or if Black people weren't that, or so on and so, which is a whole nother thing. And maybe we'll get into some of that later. But my whole thing here, Sean, is that I'm struggling with the ongoing, continual, unnecessary death of people who are literally murdered, man, in cold blood by people who are supposed to protect them, who are out looking to harm them. Now, my understanding of this situation with this police officer, he's been charged with this crime, which is appropriate and which is right. There is nothing that I saw in that video that's there. But for those who listen to Sean and I on a regular basis, first of all, too, we'd like for you to like and follow and share. If what we talk about here is helpful to you, not just this particular session, but any of the videos that we made. My bigger concern is how we view one another, Sean. The to love somebody is to see their humanity and to see their value and to see that they matter and to see that they are connected to our society and to our culture. But I think that we're having a really hard time with that. And this situation is just another poor situation in the long line of hate that's associated with it, of a white police officer using excessive, dangerous, life altering and ending measures to subdue Black people. Because the truth of the matter is this, Sean, our skin in this country has been a weapon for people, even if they don't know us. Even if they don't know us, our skin, my skin is a threat to people just because that is what has been said to certain people. And that's the way that they want to live their lives, viewing myself, yourself, and others. I don't care how many white friends you have. I have white friends too, right? It's not a matter of how many friends I have, but I'm seen as a threat. I also will say this to you. I told you I live in a suburb. It doesn't matter, Sean, where you live. This is one thing I learned a long time ago. I've always pretty much in my adult life lived in the suburbs. Let me share this with you though. It doesn't matter, Sean, on a certain level, and this was a hard thing to grasp. Where you live, how you matriculate through school, whether you went to Yale, Princeton, Harvard, right, MIT, it doesn't matter where you went. It doesn't matter your degree. There are some people who just simply will always see you as Black, and Black to them is a threat. So that's what I would like to begin this conversation with. Sonya Massey was somehow a threat to them and a target of hatred, in my opinion.
Yeah, I would 1000% agree with that. And again, when this all kind of was unfolding, so many thoughts were coming around on social media. I found myself really, really angry. Like a lot of anger just in my heart because, again, like we're here again, like something that just continuously happens throughout this country. And there's various of responses that are shared, and I'm gonna just share a little bit more, maybe some thoughts that are placed or that I've heard in my own circles in the past, maybe not from this specific incident, but from the past. That always just seems to resurface in my mind, especially being around white friends and things of those sorts. I remember being in a conversation, I think around the same time, if it wasn't George Floyd that had happened, it was is it Aubrey is his name, the individual that was shot running. A lot of that stuff was going on. A lot of social injustices were happening. And so as we were having some conversation, I couldn't help but point out how there was a remark that was made towards me and my intelligence, my ability to be well spoken and things of that sort. Yeah, to articulate. And it's not something that's new to me. I've heard throughout the course of my life, growing up from being in a predominantly white school, you're just so well spoken, and you talk white and all these other kinds of things. And I never really put pieces together at that time because I never really, was too aware of the fact that that could have been used as something negative towards who I am. But as I've grown older and understanding those things, that was a remark that was made reference to slightly in the room or in the conversation. And I was like, man, that's so interesting, like that you make this remark, and please don't hear me attack you when I say this. But there almost seems to be an assumption that people of my kind, you expect to move in a very derogative manner. And so me moving in this approach is not just different to you, but it's unexpected. And to that, it's a challenge. And we kind of had some conversation around it and things of that sort. And I know both of them, like that. I don't ever attribute either of them to be racist of any kind. That I don't have that kind of harder approach to that. And I definitely think that the conversation went really well because we kind of unpacked some things in there.
Hmm.
But I couldn't help but also notice that the other individual in the same party, um, was like, man, I just can't we all just get along and love one another and all those kinds of things. And not necessarily, this isn't obviously towards him, but I think there is a general perspective that is out there where people are just like, man, why can't we all just get along? And I do hear you when that is mentioned because,
Hmm.
yeah, I actually agree with you. Why can't we all get along and see each other as humans? But truth is, man, there's so much ugliness in the human heart towards people who are in spaces of authority, that find a way to put themselves in position to cause harm to people that are unarmed, that are undeserving, and that are no threat to the position, status, or circumstance that they are walking into, that it makes it hard to approach others in that position or kind of culminate and come together in such a fashion, because that individual has yet to truly address the ugliness in themselves that they are projecting onto other people that they're harming innocently.
Right.
And I really, really, struggle with such aspects of police officers and people of position and authority using that as a means to do what they feel they want to do and think that they can get away with it and kind of create some narrative to suggest that they had cause to do such things. I mean, if we just go back and look at just the CNN report or any other report that you might be more comfortable looking at, he literally aims to create a narrative that she was going to throw water on him,
Hmm.
like and that was your cause for not just drawing your weapon but aiming it at her skull, deadly, like just off rip. You just thought that, and then to see the video escalate to where it was just typical conversation. And when she says, I rebuke you in the name of Jesus, now all of a sudden you escalated. It was weird how all that happened. I don't necessarily think that it would be too far fetched to say that perhaps, you know, and spiritual impacts were in the room as well. I'm honestly not one to go against that. I think there's room enough at the conversation or the table to have that. But I would just say that it's really disheartening and it's really sad to see, as a young black individual, to feel hesitancy to dial 911 if I was in trouble. That's a struggle for me. Like, legitimately, I would much rather call my mother, father, a trusted friend that is around and in my circle. It seems to me that I would almost be much more comfortable doing that than dialing 911 and now feeling as if I have to deal with another threat from somebody who I don't know and who sees me as a threat before a human being, who sees me as somebody who is against them, is the enemy of the state per se, than someone that you are actually being called to serve, to help, and to de-escalate situations instead of escalate them in any kind of way. And so, this is definitely a pod, an episode that's happening as the stuff has unfolded and has kind of slowly not died down, but obviously, there was a lot of easier, higher uproar when all of this stuff was released. I honestly could not come out here and get on a microphone and on a camera and talk about these things, um, from an honest position, because there was a lot of hurt and anger in my heart to do so. I feel as if there might have been some things said or shared that would not have been received well from anybody who would catch this. And so that's really why a lot of this is shared and thought of at a later time. But I do think that, to your point, it was an innocent harming. It continues to reveal the issue that this country has been haunted by, which is white supremacy, which is the division in the country between those of us as African Americans and those of Caucasian descent. And, obviously we can get into so many other differences and distincts in between that. But I think one way to continue to grow the alarm for such issues as this, I think, are honestly maybe two things. One, that it's important to acknowledge that these things are happening, to acknowledge that these harmful issues point back to a disdain root of racism, of hatred, of you can go as far as bigotry. I mean, however you want to describe it. A lot of this stuff does have a heart behind it, for people to walk around, and maybe it's not even to the extent of deadly force, but just in the way and mannerisms in which people carry themselves, approach you, deal with you, handle you, talk about you, talk to you. Um, there seems to be a lack of desire to see one another as human beings made in the image and likeness of God. And I would much rather identify you by your skin color, and then furthermore attribute you to your heritage, your lineage, and begin to tear you down based off of that. And there has to be an acknowledgement of those things. I remember a book that you referred to, I think about actually often when these issues come about, White Too Long. If you guys have yet to really ever hear of that book,
It's
read
a
it.
great
I
book
I encourage you guys to check that out.
written by a white man, by the way, who's
Written
a
by
Christian
right, and we kind
and
of
a
get.
lawyer.
Man, he's a lawyer too. I didn't even know that. Yeah. So I mean, there's so much there. He talks a lot about just from the state of the church, of the body of Christians, even in the midst of all this stuff that at its height, from separate segregation laws, Jim Crow, all these different kinds of things that have happened throughout the history of this country. And I definitely encourage you guys to give a look, because it does tie to biblical precedents and really what our call is as believers to address, to approach these situations, and what's really expected of of white believers, right? In terms of being alongside brethren and sisters of opposite races to come together and to address this issue. But I think the first thing is acknowledging the obvious, that this still points to a hideous disdain in this culture, that has to continuously be addressed. And I think one way to address it, man, is in private conversation, in connection with people that you sit with. If you are not African American or of the same descent, and you're around people who have these conversations about Black people in a very derogative, demeaning manner, for somebody who actually may have a genuine heart to see change, I think part of the change is being confronting to those that you are in private sections and situations with, who may use such defeating language and approaches towards us, and would be like, hey, I actually know people that you are speaking to, and the way that you're talking about them, even though there's nobody like them around us, Black people around us, I would appreciate if you would kind of address and adjust this tone that you're using. Like, this is not okay how you're talking about them, how your heart, the ugliness of your heart is showing here. And I really don't appreciate the way that you're speaking to this. I think addressing those things are really, really massive, because a lot of times you hear in conversations, one thing I've grown to hear in a lot of conversations, there needs to be a reconciliation. I remember having a conversation with somebody that I actually go to church in the community with, who's a good guy, man. I really enjoy him, and having and sharing company with him and having conversations. I believe one of the first few conversations we had was really the racial divide, in the culture and country as a whole. And I remember talking a lot about, in some aspects, reconciliation, and what could reconciliation look like between Black people and white people. And I think what I came to learn, whether I said it in that conversation or I learned it afterwards, was that it's hard to reconcile something when you think of reconciliation, that is actually pointing to a previous relationship and connection that was meaningful prior to the severance of it. In order to reconcile something was there before it that was really meaningful. Yeah, ancestors and those who came before us, there was no connection. There was no meaningful relationship there. And so, in fact, a lot of people, of course, in the history of African Americans, of Black people, I mean, they came here on a ship.
Mm-hmm.
So like there's no connection there. There's nothing to necessarily reconcile in that aspect, as much as there is to just start doing right. in changing the course and changing direction, changing behavior, and admitting to maybe perhaps some of the prejudices and ugliness that may be in your own heart that may keep you from seeing people that are opposite of you as human beings, and as people that, even though you may not look the same, and again, this extends not just to race, this extends to sexuality, this extends to all kinds of things. We attribute this idea that, hey, if I'm kind to you, if I'm loving to you, if I'm around you, if I sit with you, if I see you as somebody like myself, that automatically means that I'm accepting of your behavior. I accept this and I accept that, as it pertains to somebody who may not do what you do, who may
Mm.
be in different and opposing beliefs and spectrums of life. And to that, I would say that you have that all wrong. There are some people that you will sit with who are opposite to what you believe, but that does not mean that you condone what they believe. But you do have an obligation as a believer, and you do have an obligation as a person, as a human being, to love and see that individual and not base them off of the things that they are not because of where you feel you are. And I think there's room enough at the table to have that connection and conversation. So
Yeah.
I would say, necessarily, not necessarily reconciliation, but begin doing right. If you're in small spaces and connecting with people who may not be of the black descent, and you hear them talking crazy about black folk, I mean, I don't think there's anything wrong with you stepping in and addressing that. And if that is not a space that you feel you can actually continue to remain in, then let your distance and separation speak louder than maybe perhaps what you may address in that moment. Because I think that that can say a lot. I would also say the second thing, and I can toss it back to you, in dealing with some of these things, is really answering the question in some way. And I can never say I'll answer it as a whole, but maybe a little bit of a part of it. How do we navigate such issues as believers, as black believers, white believers, no matter your ethnicity and race? How do we deal with this as people who are called to love others, who create such chaos, who are headlining and are part of such demonstrative and near really demonic activity in such
Yeah.
a way? How do you approach it? And I don't think I've necessarily came to a full conclusion. And I know that as life continues moving forward, I'll learn some other perspectives to perhaps add to it. But where I'm at currently, I would say that there's an importance to use these moments to continue connecting with God and not separate from him. um, because a lot of these things can produce a lot of anger and injustice in your heart that, if you allow to stew and simmer long enough, can easily shift into places of bitterness, unforgiveness, and will cause you to lump everyone into the offense of one person that caused a legitimate offense in the moment, and then you begin to lump everybody into that same category as a means to perhaps stay distant and not create genuine relationships with people who don't look like you, who don't see life the way you do, and therefore it becomes very secluded. And perhaps those are the same people that you're called to, that you're called to reach, that you're called to love, you're called to serve. And it's really hard to do so with a lot of bitterness and malice that has developed due to a lot of anger that has yet to be
Yeah.
dealt with in a proper way. And so I think of, obviously, Paul's writing when he says be angry and sin not. Right.
Right.
So the anger that you experience from seeing injustices like this, I would say let it be present. Like, anger is not a bad thing. It's what we do with the anger that then becomes a bad thing, depending on how it's handled. And so I would say to that, to allow the injustices that you may feel is present in your heart, that you see is active in culture due to the mishandling of people, the mishandling of human beings, regardless of their skin color. But in this specific case, to Black people all across this culture and all across this nation, allow the injustices that you see to reveal to you a couple things: that a greater moral law must be present for this indignation in my heart to scream out that this is wrong and justice is necessary.
Sure.
Let that point to a moral standard that is greater than us, that lumps us all into one umbrella, that we need to love our neighbors as ourselves, ultimately pointing to God. But then allow the injustice and the anger that you feel to just remain closer and clinging to who God is, how God sees you, and how God desires you to see others. Because when I use these situations to depart from God, it actually leads me to creating more chaos instead of being a part of the solution to the chaos. But if I remain closer to God and allow my life to be transformed in Him and through Him and His love and compassion, there's a lot more that comes out of that that is life giving. I cannot tell you that all of these issues will ever go away. I can never promise that. But I can promise that it won't always be like this, because those same people will have to give an answer and an account to the things that they've done. If not on this side of earth through accountability and through serving time that is required and necessary, they will have to give an answer to God Himself for the actions that they've done. And I really do believe that as our responsibility moving forward in this as believers, man, is to mourn with those who have egregiously lost their lives due to careless actions of those in authority, um, but also be willing to be a part of the solution where we're willing to address the ugliness that may be in our own hearts, that even though it does not go to the length of executing people who don't look like and sound like us, but perhaps it deals with how we look at them, how we view them, and our unwillingness to approach and have conversations with such people. Allow these moments to kind of serve as a self-reflective moment, and really continue to ask God to deal with our hearts ever so gently, while loving ourselves and loving one another in an appropriate way that reflects God's heart, and looking to see each other as human beings made in the image and likeness of God, instead of looking to diverse one another based on our outward appearance. And because we don't like it, we now feel the need to respond to it in an ugly fashion. Um, Black people are human too. And it's a shame that that has to be said in such a time as this, but Black people are human too. And to really make a call like that and end up being the one dead, it's terrible. It's a sad deal, sad day. um and it makes me question a whole lot about, man, where do I really have an opportunity to feel safe in this country if I'm ever in trouble. Like it's pretty crazy. So kind of my opening thoughts to some of it. That might have been sporadic, but hopefully it landed somewhere.
Yeah, look, man, this is a complex issue because we're dealing with human hearts,
Yeah.
and again, people who don't necessarily ascribe to our worldview, our Christian worldview, which is everyone is made and created in God's image. That means that we're fearfully and wonderfully made. God made us, created us, blessed us, put value on us, even if other people don't place value on us. There's value on us because we belong to the creator. There's value on the person that's also perpetrating the crimes for these police
Right.
officers. I will tell you this is that again, there's a lot of books out there. Nice Racism, Robin DiAngelo, also powerful book. She speaks so eloquently, and she's been attacked by certain people, because she's an Italian lady, but she pointed out the realities of, racism even in her own home, growing up, and how, she had the biases. Oprah did a show where she had a lady who ran a major marketing firm who hired this black lady who was, you know, um, she was a rising star, but um, she had the dreads, and her name was like, you know, Shaquandra or something like that. And she straight up told Oprah, she's like, I was a perpetuator of these stereotypes. I don't necessarily think that's racism as much as it is ignorance. And I wanted to say that when you first got into where you
Yeah.
were. I think racism has a hatred that's
Absolutely.
associated with it, right? I think it's very pronounced, very overt, very demanding of certain things. Like you see some of the videos where, you see a Amazon driver or a FedEx driver going to a certain community, and the white guys like, get off my property. It's like, brother, I'm just delivering your package. Like, I'm not trying to be on your property. It's crazy, as if like we're living, in the late 1800s to early 1900s, right? Like we're slaves or something. And so it's kind of crazy to see that. But man, I think that, yes, we have to keep coming to tables. We have to keep having conversations like this. We have to keep talking about these things. I also would tell you that I have some of my own thoughts about this again. So for those of you who've seen any of our other videos, I'm approximately 32 years older than Sean, than Coach Sean. And so I lived a different life. I saw a lot of other things. For example, too, Sean, I will say I'm not going to just blame a lot of this just on unhinged, racist white people.
Yeah, I agree. I like that.
I'm going to tell you that I also want to say this too, in all fairness. There's true white allies, and then there's white allies who don't know how to be an ally to the criminal activity that happens against us, but their heart is in the right place, but they don't know how to be an ally. And also that black people are tired of teaching white people what racism is, and so we're like, I don't want to keep explaining that to you. All those kind of things, man, are things that are out there that we absolutely positively can have conversation around. But again, more than racism, from the Christian world perspective, from the Christian worldview, we're looking at, hey, how do you view other human beings, right? And different things along those lines. And so with that being said, Sean, again, I'm going to make this brief. I think, man, that we have to continue to have conversations, and those conversations have to go beyond, I have white friends or I have black friends or good with it. This is beautiful. And it's kind. And I think that there's a place for all of that. And I think that we should have those conversations. But I'm gonna be honest with you. The real conversations that you would have with your friends that are different than you, white, and if you're black in particular, they're gonna be there, they should be very uncomfortable. They shouldn't be comfortable. They should be very uncomfortable. But you should be open to also the questions coming to you as a black person, and sharing your insights with white people, while not making sweeping statements like all white people are racist. That's just not
Right.
true. That's just not a true statement, right?
Facts. Yeah.
Just like all black people wouldn't be criminals, right? So to paint somebody of any culture into a corner and then paint everybody into that corner is absolutely positively just high level ignorance. That just means that you don't know your history, different things along those lines. But growing up, Sean, I saw the drastic changes that took place in culture, right? So like I said, I think I told you this story before. One of the first things that ever happened to me, man, was I moved to another side of town when I went to high school from the hood, basically. And doing so, man, one of the first dudes I met was this white dude named Jeff. And Jeff invited me to his house. And I thought to myself, brother, no, because we not about to have no lynching party going up in here, right? Like, I'm not going to your house. And I remember going to this new school and watching all these white kids and black kids and kids from all these other cultures. Man, they all played together. They hung out together. They talked together. That's not where I came from. I came from a neighborhood that was predominantly black. And on the other side, what we call the tracks, which is where the railroad tracks from our community, the other side of that was a barrio. And so over there, that was all where all the Hispanics were. You didn't go on that side, and they didn't come to our side. That's how it went down. And if you got caught over there at nighttime, it was going to be you was going to pay. And so the only white people that we saw that were authority figures were police officers, the principal at the school, right, the nurse, different things along those lines. Even our school monitors, right? Our hallway monitors, our playground monitors, right? All the lunch ladies were either black or Hispanic. So we never saw anybody in any kind of that was black in any type of authoritative figure, except for white people. White people are mostly in that. Now, As I moved on and I went to this high school, man, this high school opened me up, to be quite honest with you. I'm just telling you the truth. This high school opened me up, Sean, because I was pretty much closed off to the relationships that I would have with somebody who was Caucasian, because I was taught that I couldn't trust them. I also had never seen, from the context that I was in, I had never seen again, other people in places of authority. Now, I saw some television shows here and there where you would see a black police officer or whatever, whatnot. But then most of the television shows that they allowed us in depicted us as criminals, different things along those lines, right? Or some kind of bad guy, or you were Shaft or something like that, or whatever, right? So it was always smooth or cool or whatever, whatnot. And then the comics at that time were Eddie Murphy, Richard Pryor, things along those lines. And, everything about that was our struggle, right? The rap music that I was listening to coming up, it was all NWA, it was Ice Cube, it was Public Enemy, right? So everything was against coming together, right? I mean, NWA had probably one of their most famous songs was, Blank the Police, coming straight from the underground, young Negro got it bad because I'm brown, right? The whole thing was, like I'm a target, and honestly, I can't tell you that has completely gone away. I think now, of course, in the last several years, with one particular individual who was the former president of the United States, I think that has risen without them, stating that, hey, I'm everybody's president. He decided that he wanted to be certain people's president, and in that process, he helped raise up those who were kind of seething underground, living in underground spaces and caves, if you will, out in the middle of nowhere. He helped bring those people back to the forefront and to give them voice again, because the whole movement is about making America white again, making America be what America used to be. Because I'll be honest with you, the whole ideal of Make America Great Again is this ideal, man, of the fact that America used to be great when white men ran America, when America was run by people who were white and had authority. And here's some of the reality, and I'm gonna say this and shut it down. For me, some of the reality is this, Sean, is that this country is currently 45%, mixed, racially mixed, right? From people getting married to other people, to other people just leaving their cultures and coming into other cultures and things along those lines. And so it's now called the browning of America, right? So people are just, people are marrying who they want to marry, who they love. I have, right? And I think that it's important, man, for us to understand this, that part of the challenge that is happening right now with the rise of this rhetoric and these conversations is that, man, people, white people, certain white people in particular, white men in particular, are hollering and screaming about the culture, man, and that it's changing, and that they're losing this grip. And there's this thought that black people, once the percentages which they're projecting, that these by 2034, the quote white race won't be the dominant race. We're already at 45%. I just heard this week, actually. And so it's a problem. That feeling is there, like, hey, we're losing it. And so you start to hear this rhetoric too, of like, you start to see those who claim to be Christians, just because you're conservative, by the way, doesn't mean that you're a Christian, but who are running after these ideologies. Here's one of the challenges, Sean, that's happening there, is that the birther dearth concept that a white man wrote, which was, hey, he wanted more white women to have more white babies. And to do that means that, and this is why the former president tried to did overturn the Roe versus Wade thing, because more Caucasian women were having abortions than black women were, and any other women. And so their whole thing was, we need to put a stop to this to preserve whiteness. Okay. And so this is a whole nother thing that we can get into, man, when it comes right down to it, right? We can start talking about what ethnicities, because if we're really paying attention to this historically, right, and we go back and we know history, Sean, the reality is that white isn't even a color, neither is black. And the people who came from here came from various different countries, and you would typically be identified by the culture you came from and not by white or black. So that's a social construct that's been put out there. Again, we could talk about that another time, but I just want to get through this little piece here and tell you that there's these ideals, these ideologies, Sean, of the loss of white authoritative power in the culture. We start to see black people in politics. We start to see black people in media. We start to see black people as influencers in various different areas, and other people of color. And that's unnerving for a lot of our Caucasian brothers and sisters. And so that's a lot of what we're seeing here today, man. And it's an unfortunate scenario and situation. But lastly, I want to say this, okay? And this is all I have on this. The last thing I want to say, because I alluded to this here in just a moment when I said I can't just blame Caucasian people for it. I believe, Sean, that your generation let something come in that I think just is unruly and is egregious, man, on so many different levels. And that is letting people call other black people the N-word right in front of them, and then trying to say we co-opted this word, man, to make it mean something different. No. The problem with this whole ideal is that you can't use this term that has had people lynched, burned at the stake, hosed with water, churches burned down, shot and killed. Emmett Till multiple times had Caucasian men historically get off and not be held accountable for murdering black people. The derogatory term to put you here that told you drink from this faucet, it's going to be outside in the worst conditions, and we eat over here. You ride on this portion of the bus, we ride on that portion of the bus. Rosa Parks. You can't co-opt the term and then try to quote change its meaning into something else. There's not a word in the dictionary right now that we know. There's not a word in the dictionary right now that has fundamentally changed its meaning. So it's very interesting that I hear some people from our culture be like, I'm trying to completely change the meaning. No, the N-word is the N-word, no matter how you say it. And to let other people who are not of your culture address you in such a manner as some type of term of endearment, man, I think that is something that should have never happened, to be quite honest with you. I think, so Sonya Massey, this is an egregious situation. I believe, Sean, the only way for humankind, humans, people, is to have heart transformation through God. I really believe that. I also believe, let me say this, because I think this is important for those who aren't believers and will say, well, yeah, we tried that and religion isn't the answer. I'm not talking about being religious either. I'm talking about having a relationship with God. Let me say this. We have to present the Jesus of the Bible and not the Jesus of our culture, and not the Jesus of that we want to have on our side, or not this. No, we need to present the Christ of the Bible in order for heart transformation to take place. And let me say this, the reason why we probably will never see, especially I'm sure in my lifetime, we'll probably never see true transformation culturally, racially, is because the human heart, man, even when Jesus was walking on the earth and they saw him do miracles, the Bible said that there was a plot to kill Jesus. And guess what they did? And even when they had an opportunity, they were like, you want Jesus or Barabbas? They was like, give us Jesus, right? I mean, give us Barabbas. They wanted Barabbas free while they crucified the man who came to change their hearts, because this message means that you can't be the same person, and you must come to this higher moral standard, as you alluded to earlier, and walk in that. So that's my 2 cents on that. Heart transformation and change comes from God when he is appropriately presented and represented, and not from a cultural standpoint of view, but from the way that he has revealed himself to us in original writings and in scripture that is close in context.
Yeah, and that's where we want to land, right? Like that's the centrality of it all, is to land on representing the Jesus of the Bible, not Jesus of our culture. I love that line because that says so much. I think too, all cultures, let alone just black, white, or so on and so forth. There's a few thoughts that I think I'll end with that I kind of noted here, but I do want to start with what you just said, because you said one of the most egregious things you believe that has occurred in in my generation is allowing people of the who are outside of the culture to use the N word and try to change the meaning and definition. So I think I want to ask this question: how do you feel that we should go about people within our culture using such a word and language? Is it something that we ought to then, because you hear all the time, well, shoot, I mean, we know who this is for, man. This is our language. We take ownership rights of calling one another the N-word, man. It's just, that's my homie, that's my guy. That's the meaning of it, whatever it is, but that's within us. I can use that. I can say that as a black person to another black person. I can say that from one homie to another home girl, whatever that is, whatever it is. But allowing somebody else on the outside of that to use that to me, that's where I draw the line. Should we even then use it in our own culture?
No. No. Straight up, absolutely not. Listen, I know we got different terms for it, even on platform that we've been on, Ninja and all that kind of, but let me say something to you. If we understand, Shauna, this is just purely my opinion. And that's the beautiful thing about a platform like this, right? Whoever's watching, you can totally disagree. I don't believe that we understand the implications of the word. And I don't believe that the definition of it can be changed and be used as a term of endearment. It's a word that's associated with death, murder, subjugation, terrible historical things. And why can't we just call each other what our mama and them named us? Why can't you just be my guy? Why can't you just be fam then? Right?
I feel that.
Why? What is this? Right? You're literally calling yourself something that people who meant to minimize you do, and you're, quote, co-opting it and turning it into something else. No. And again, I'm sure I'll get pushback on that. That's okay. Because listen, I want to say this to the people. You have a right to believe what you want to believe, but you're listening. So this is my answer. I don't believe that the word is appropriate in any way, shape, or form. Now, I'll be honest with you, man. You don't hear people my age or older using that. Y'all use that. Mm-hmm. We understand. The people that are 20, 30 years older than me, that are in their 70s and 80s, man, they get it, Sean. They're like, no, people died for that.
And I feel that. Yeah.
People lost their lives for that. We struggled over that. And now that's who I'm gonna be when you run into me. Nah, come on, fam. Come on, my guy. Yeah. No, what? No. Sean, when you don't understand history, you will dismiss it as if it's an inconvenience to your ignorance. You're just dismissing it. You're like, nah, none of that. That's y'all. That's how y'all did. Whatever. Me and my boys, we get down, so on and so forth. Yeah. Even if you got white friends, Hispanic friends from other cultures, whatever they might be, or whatever, y'all might be able to get down. This does not stop the reality that we live in a country that's set up to say, hey, you can't come up. And if you do, we're gonna put you in your place. The thing where the former president was on earlier this week at the National Black Broadcasters thing. He was on there. He let all them black people know in a matter of seconds. First of all, your setup is raggedy. Second of all, you came on here and you asked me a question I don't like. So he let them know. He was letting them know you're beneath me. Quickly. I just watched an interview with him and Laura Ingraham on Fox. He was like, well, yeah, we really just need to be able to do these things. And do this, Laura, or else the country's just gonna, the country's just gonna be destroyed. Now he's talking to a white woman. He's talking to her just as, yeah.
Right.
He gets on there. He talking to these black journalists. He was mad aggressive, letting them know your little setup is raggedy too. See, we want to hope and believe, Sean. There's a book out there called Willful Blindness.
Okay.
And it basically just is like people who are like, well, it ain't really happening to me, so I don't really have to pay much attention to it.
That's a lot of where I would say my generation falls under. Yeah.
Here's what your generation fails to understand. And I said this on the other platform that we were on.
Mm-hmm.
When you don't realize the shoulders that you are standing on, once again, you will dismiss the sacrifices of the people who came before you. Because the very reason why y'all get to walk in the restaurants today and have a white person serve you, the very reason why you get to go see a white doctor, you get to go see a white optometrist, a white podiatrist, you get to live in a white neighborhood if you really want to, right? You get to do all these things around Caucasian people is because of the people who sacrifice not only their dignity in many instances, but their lives. Those are the shoulders that you're standing on. And they like, man, shoot, we ain't got none of that. Right? Because somebody died for that. When you start talking about people, Martin Luther King, they just like, man, this is my day off. I can't wait to MLK because, man, that's going to give me a 3-day weekend and I'm going to go do such and such and such and such. Have no concept of the historical context of what Martin Luther King had to walk through, what all of the things. And again, think about it. All for saying, can't we just all get along? He was murdered for saying, can't we just all get along? There's a major gap in understanding the historical things that have taken place and where people stand today. They just feel like the world just evolved to there. No, people had to die for the rights that black folks have right this moment. Had to die for those rights. Had to die for the right for me to be interracially married. Yeah.
Right. 1,000.
Yeah. Loving versus Virginia. True story out there. You can watch it on Netflix, right? This whole ideal of, again, back to being human. We good. You just, y'all, you stick with yours and we'll stick with mine. How could you have a lady get killed at a riot by people who are no good, mean no good to the culture, and be the president, the commander-in-chief of the country, and say there were good people on both sides? How is that possible? They walk around with tiki torches and shaved off heads. Those are good people on both sides? No, there were no good people necessarily at that thing. There were people who were there. This wasn't about being good. This was about people who were saying, my rights as a human being are being violated here. So how do we call these people? How do we get to the point of calling people that are full of hate good people? No, sir. No, sir. And people aren't paying attention, so they think that it went away. But Sean, do you realize that Bank of America, just less than a decade ago, had to pay out billions of dollars back to black people? You can Google it. Whoever's watching this, Google it for yourself, because of poor lending habits that they had to black customers only, specifically. Higher interest rates, mostly on home loans. Same thing with Wells Fargo, not hiring people. Do you know that Tesla had to also deal with the lawsuit of them because of black employees at Tesla have challenges and problems? Do you know that there's a black catering company, well-known black catering company where Tesla is, where their headquarters is, who had some food catered in, and then it was a black lady's company, very well-known company. They refused to pay the bill until she went on social media. When she went on social media, then their owner, that guy, silver truck guy, moon truck guy, came out and was like, oh, I didn't know any of this happened. I'm definitely going to take care of it. I'll pay for it. Sure. We act as if we don't know that it exists, man. And it exists.
Right.
It exists. Now, not from everybody.
Right.
No, not from everybody. And I have so many different stories that I could tell you, but we don't want to run over on time here because your question was, should we stop using the word? I think that we don't understand the full history of the word. Everybody doesn't. And I think it's problematic. And for those who disagree with me, totally fine with that. Have your points, have your feelings about them. I'm fine with that. That's the kind of dialogue we need to have. We can agree to disagree, but my feelings on it are the word shouldn't be used at all.
Yeah, and I appreciate you sharing all that. And I think I got one more question. I'm gonna summarize the last of my points, and we'll get out of here. You know, in the moment of you perhaps evangelizing, teaching to somebody in a one-on-one conversation, and that word is used not necessarily directly towards you, but it's describing somebody in their particular situation or scenario that you are perhaps questioning them on, speaking to them to, but you are in the midst of evangelizing them. And that word is thrown around quite a bit in the conversation and sentences. What's your response in that moment?
So are you saying that I'm talking to African American who's using the N word throughout
or white?
Or what? Oh, well, if it's a white dude, I'm be totally honest with you. First thing I'm gonna do, or white person in general, I'm gonna ask them to refrain from using the word because it's offensive to me. First thing I'm gonna say. And then I'm gonna tell them, I would ask them why they believe in any way, shape, or form that it's appropriate or right to use such terminology. The way I would frame that though is to ask them, do they understand, Sean, the implications of using this terminology, right? And I would ask them to give me their understanding and knowledge historically of the word and its impact on culture, on society, on Black people, past and present. I would ask them to tell me this. Now, there are some people who tell me, man, a name don't mean nothing. You can call me whatever you want to call me. I feel you on that 100%. I'm saying, do we understand the people who died for it, though?
Okay.
Totally feel you on that. But I would address them. I would address both people in that manner. A Black individual, African American, I would ask them the same question. Hang on for a second, man, because I want to get to your heart, but I want to clear up something else here as we're communicating here. You're using this term. Can I ask you why you continue to use this term? What is your, oh man, you know, that's just how I grew up or whatever, whatnot. Now, to get to this person, I might allow them, an African American person, to keep sharing it and saying it while I continue to, again, peel back the layers of digging to their heart so I can clearly have a conversation with them where I could talk to them about who God is and about a destiny and a journey and a purpose for them being alive. So I would handle those things slightly differently. Yes.
Okay. Yeah. And I was just curious because, you know, I don't think I've been in that situation before. Don't know what God would ever have in store if I ever was guaranteed an opportunity to do that. And in the midst of conversation that is getting thrown around, how would I respond? I would say this, two things. One, I grew up predominantly, as far as I'm concerned, in a very suburb space for most of my life. And of course, the closest thing I might have had outside of it was maybe when I was younger, living in Illinois. But even then, you know, I was just surrounded by an amazing community. And there wasn't a whole lot of experiences. I really can't tell you or count on one hand many, if any, experiences I've had where I could actually point out and say, bro, that was racist. I was racially profiled in that moment. And you know, I remember when I actually made my move, or when the family moved from Illinois to Texas, now about 13 plus years ago. And the first school year that I ever had in a public school system, I had a friend who lived a couple houses down from me, and we would walk to the bus station or the bus stop together. And after we met the first couple days, we just kind of started casually greeting each other, shaking hands, the whole bit. And I remember him introducing, or, you know, coming into the conversation, "What's up, my nigga?" You know, all that. And I just was stuck because I had come from a private school. I had come from it was a culture shock to your boy. So I was just like, what did you say? And I didn't know if I was supposed to, like, am I supposed to be mad here? Like, is this a situation I'm supposed to be upset and salty about, or do I just keep going on about my day? and whatnot. And so, I'm not even, necessarily, I was going to say I wasn't ashamed of admitting this, but I'm going to admit this because this is just a part of my story, man. Like I grew up, absolutely after sixth grade and on. I mean, that was a term I used all the time to describe friends, to talk to people. I used it regularly. I think what caused me to change my language, and not to say that there aren't moments that I have even today where I'm like, bro, like I might be thinking it because he just do something crazy or whatnot. But I've done a really strong effort to not just that, but just any kind of derogatory leaning language, just because, I just want to do something. I want to be able to be honorable in my conversations and
Sure.
let others know that, man, I see you and I respect you where you're coming from. And I don't want to use any kind of language that might keep you from
Hmm.
thinking I'm aiming to see your heart and I'm trying to
Sure.
have a genuine conversation with you, no
Sure.
matter if it's in joking fashion, we're just enjoying each other's company, or something serious comes about. Now, again, there are other people who are in different spaces, and I completely respect that,
Sure.
especially of like-minded culture, right? Like that's kind of where I'm like, okay, I hear you on that. Man, I would say a few things to this, and this is kind of where I'll end everything. Just these few points. Number one is that I think you've pointed to it throughout the remainder of the conversation that, man, we want to get away from the generalization of things from situations like this that have occurred with Sonya Massey, right? Like, even though that was a bad cop in the bunch, and clearly it's shown, not all cops are bad,
Right.
right?
Not all.
Not all cops are bad, just like not all black people are in the streets, running the streets, and so on and
True.
so forth. Just like not
True
all
story.
white people are racist and got racist agendas behind their approach to you and all those kinds of things. And so it's important to not navigate through such a lens. And I think oftentimes when you start navigating through lenses of generalizations, you're oftentimes allowing pain to discolor your view on the world. There's something that has happened to you personally, inwardly, emotionally, that has traumatized you, has created a wound in your life that then has given you permission to view the world through such a tinted lens. And if we're not careful, we'll allow generalizations to ruin relationships that we are actually called to steward and to invest into, people that we are called to lead, people that we are called to love, people that we are called to simply serve and be present in, all because of a lens that we have yet to address from dysfunctional or pains that have been caused, right? And so I think it's important that we continue to self-reflect in those areas in the moment that we find ourselves in those spaces of generalizations. And I do want to validate the immediate anger and pain that actually may usher us into that space, because that is normal. Especially if something repetitive happens, you would easily come to it. But man, it don't matter who I come across. All people just, man, it just don't matter, bro. All ninjas ain't trash, and all like we just go on and on. And I think that is a very valid perspective to enter into. I don't want you to stay there though, because I think there at some point we have to come to a place of sitting down and unpacking those feelings, those raw emotions, and getting to a fair perspective that allows us to hold some type of tension, but also allows us to grow from a generalization point. We see it in relationships. We see it in racial profilings, racism, all those kinds of diversities that take place. I mean, we see it in all kinds of areas. And so I think it's something to kind of point out and do some self-reflection on.
Yeah.
The last few points here, man, is I really want to ask just some questions to people. Like what are you fighting for? What's your priority of what you're fighting for? I just got through sharing with some of you that I have yet to really experience something that I would look at and say, bro, without a shadow of a doubt, I just got racially profiled. I don't even know how to handle this situation right now, outside of perhaps feeling like I need to defend my name, because I can't have people looking at me like I'm crazy and thinking that I'm not black because I'm not responding to somebody calling me out of my name who's not black. So I need to get angry, throw fisticuffs, and defend my honor. I think there's a lot to that. I have yet to experience something like that. And to people who have experienced something like that and have moved in that manner, I do want you to consider what is more important that you fight for: your name status and identity as it's perceived to people around you, or perhaps is it more fighting for who you're called to be by the one who has designed you, and honoring, loving, and pouring into the people that are in front of you? Because truth be told, there are so many people that are out here throughout so many things that have occurred from social injustices. And you may not like me for saying this, but I could care less in all respect. There are many people who are in a vicinity of marching and doing all these kinds of things for social injustices to somebody that yes was innocently harmed, innocently unalive. There's no neglecting that. And that doesn't mean that you therefore lose the right to stand up for injustices when these things take place. But I just want you to do a self-reflection and just watch the effort that you're putting to somebody you never knew. All the while, the people that are around you immediately, you treat like trash, you pretend as if you don't see, you neglect, and you fail to love and honor. I think that is something that you really want to pay attention to, because there are more people that I see, man, when social injustice happen, man, you're quick to put Black Lives Matter in your bio, and you're quick to put your black fists up in every photo that you take. And now everything all of a sudden becomes supporting Black Lives Matter movement, all in your neck, all in your home, all in your room, all on your social media platforms. And yet you have the nastiest character, the nastiest heart. You are still a very, very incomplete individual because of the perspectives that you're carrying outside of Black Lives Matter that is still ruining who you're called to be. And I think there's something to be said about what you prioritize for, and keep the main thing the main thing. I am not an individual that, as far as I'm concerned, will put myself in position to go street protests and all those kinds of things. And I'm not saying that those who are, that they shouldn't. I'm just keeping you in some framework to really prioritize the right things, because some of you are marching and caring more about innocent, unarmed people being killed that you never know. But the people that are currently in your life that you do know, you have an opportunity to love and be present amongst each and every day, and you fail to do so, and you don't care to do so, and it shows. And so I think that's something worth considering. And a lot of, and then again, like, there's just a lot of people who walk around with this victim mentality. That's another thing I really want to hit at too. This is not a space to allow such situations to cause you to have a victim mentality. Like, oh, I'm trying, but the white man. No, it's not always the white man. Like, it ain't always that.
Not
A lot of
always.
times it's your laziness, it's your unwillingness to actually put forth what God has put in front of you to maximize. It's your unwillingness to self-reflect. It's your unwillingness to address the issues that are going on in your current life that have actually kept you in the cycle of dysfunction and pain that you continuously see, and you refuse to address it. Like, there's got to be some honesty in some of these spaces that I think is worth pointing out as well. And then I would also say, first, as a believer, my primary objective is not to be a representative of my ethnic or racial community. My primary objective is to be a believer, to
Yeah,
be a
first and
follower,
foremost.
first and foremost, to
While
be a
I
follower.
still have the opportunity,
Yes.
and I should be very proud, as should you, if you're Italian, Chinese,
No matter what
Russian,
it is.
whatever you
Absolutely.
are, be proud of your heritage, no doubt about it. 1000%. But
Yeah.
yes, I agree
Yeah.
with you.
Yeah. I should be a believer first and foremost. Doesn't mean I neglect my heritage or ethnicity or anything of that sort. But I just see, again, there's just a lot of extremes in these conversations where people feel they have to go to one side or another and forego withholding tension. Like, man, okay, I can be a believer and be black and be white and be Asian and be Chinese. I can be
And be proud
both
of those
and
things.
be proud of those things, and recognize that God has such an interesting way of allowing
That's
his
right.
spirit, his being, his love, his character, who he is, to shine through who he's uniquely designed you to be. Like, nobody came into this world choosing from a wall of colors what their skin tone was going to be. Not a soul. Everybody came in, and it's so interesting that we continue to come back to the image and likeness of God, because God has such a unique way of designing us all with who we are and who we're called to be as we reflect these human bodies that are earthly, but more importantly, reflecting his image and likeness that is innately in us, coming back to him. And so it's amazing, man. Like, people all over the world, all over, all different ethnicities, races, colors, and yet God is still just uniting and connecting with us, man. Unity in diversity, right? Ravi Zacharias has said that on a number of occasions, and I love that. Unity in diversity. And it's amazing when Jesus asked for the coin that is asked of, as they are dealing with taxes. He says, whose image is this on the coin? And he says, this is Caesar. So render to Caesar's what is Caesar's. But it's interesting if he would have asked one more question: whose image is on you? and return that back to the image bearer. And that's a reflection of us having the image of God, and we ought to always return back to the one whose image we bear. That is where real life and an abundance of it really flows from it. And I think that's really, really important to hold on to in this whole conversation. Two more things that I'm through. Don't live your life offended. Don't allow these situations to create such a curated heart of offense that you wake up every day looking for something to be offended by, that you look at every conversation and every approach from somebody and just assume that
Yeah.
they're approaching you with a racist agenda, that they're looking to get one above you and one on you. Not everybody is out to get you. Not everybody knows your name, and not everybody really cares about who you are or where you're going.
Yep.
So it's important to keep that in mind, because again, moments like these can easily push us into those spaces. And if we're not careful, we'll move paranoid instead of moving in the present.
Yeah.
And that's a really, really really strong struggle to be in. And there's just simply too much purpose and value in your life to allow what people who don't know you say about you to have so much weight. And this kind of, and this is just me, you know, I know that we've kind of unpacked a little bit about using certain terminologies and things like that. And it's not to say that I don't ever allow, or there's no word that anybody can say that can just throw me off the railings or make me upset or make me cause to be offended. Because I definitely know that there are some, just knowing me. I know I've had a lot of conversations with people who have used the N word as I've built friendships. And it's just been one of those things that I was like, yeah, it wasn't necessarily meant in such a derogatory way, but that was where I was. Of course, I've changed in some of those thinkings. But if I were to, you know, sit in front of somebody and they were choosing to use such negative language towards me, of course, in a hateful manner, I don't necessarily think it's something that I want to run to and create a protest out of and a t-shirt out of and make so much known that this was something that occurred to me, to the point where I need others to validate my experience by marching and protesting and all those kinds of things. I would say that maybe I need to separate myself from that situation. Clearly, that person doesn't want to hear what I have to say, doesn't want to hear what I have to offer. And so then I just need to walk away. But I don't want to allow the words of other people, especially people who don't know me, to have so much weight over my life that I choose to hold on to that. And I think, man, a lot of times as a believer, especially in this spiritual growth and understanding and foundation in our lives, man, we actually have the power to let go of a lot more things than we think. Not everything that is thrown at me is meant to be caught, is meant to be attached to, is meant to be hold on to, and not discrediting or demeaning words, because words have power. Like, there are a lot of things that people have said over the course of your life that have stuck with you, whether it was in love or it was out of a form of hatred. They have stuck with you because words have power. But I do recognize on the same token that what I feed actually has the tendency to grow. And if I'm choosing to feed into the things that are pure, that are loving, that are reflective of God, that are the right things, people that are speaking not just to who I am, but to the potential in me and allowing me to grow in those things, I want to focus more on that than perhaps what somebody may think of me who doesn't know me from a can of paint, and really their ugly use of words, hateful agendas that are resting in their heart is a whole lot more reflective of who they are, not of who they are trying to project me to be based on what they're trying to speak in me. And so I have an opportunity to really just focus on the words and right words that I want to choose to allow in my circle and feed those instead of just any negativity that might come across me. And if that means I have to separate myself from a person, from a situation, from a conversation, then so be it, right? But I don't necessarily think that everything is worth drawing up to such a level of offense that I need everybody to hear that this happened to me, to validate my experience. And this is something that needs to be done with right now. Because truth is, man, what if that person never changes? Like, are you going to allow that to hinder the rest of your life? If that person never stops saying such things, are you going to allow that to hinder you for the rest of your life? I choose to believe that there's just, again, too much value and purpose on your life and who God's calling you to be and what God has in store for your life to allow what offenses people are trying to throw your way to keep you from finishing the race God has set before you. And that doesn't mean that it goes unaddressed or unacknowledged, but at the same time, it doesn't mean that it must cost your entire life devoted to that. And that also is not saying that people who have devoted their lives to addressing social injustices are wasting their life, because God actually does have the capacity to call people to such spaces.
And it clearly is seen people like Martin Luther King and those alike who literally have come to and have created monumental changes in the culture. And I think there is room for that if God so be it. And so the last thought that I kind of had on some of this is, well, you know, again, not everything is a hidden racist agenda. We kind of addressed that too. There was a TikTok. I'm sure we'll come back around and address it. I just want to show you guys how real it is. I'm not going to show it here. We've already kind of gone over time, but you know, a woman was just basically summarizing, explaining as she was working in the hospital. A older age white woman and a middle aged white woman were having conversation. Everybody was joking around, and they kind of got to the conversation of washcloths and all those kinds of things. And the middle-aged white woman expressed to the older-aged white woman that she washes on some occasions 3 times a day, but she definitely washes daily, and uses a washcloth at that. And the older-aged white woman was kind of addressing this, trying to understand more why she was doing it, and she actually expresses why she doesn't think that white people ought to wash as much. As he says, no, our skin is pure. And she looks at, you know, the woman who is actually making this video, because she was in the room. She looks at her and she says, you know, people like her have to wash multiple times a day, every day, because they're not pure. And that white skin is cleanly and pure. Therefore, this idea that they had to wash every day was not necessary. And she concludes this video by explaining that not only was this a mindset that she was carrying, but that the children she had, it was indoctrinated into them, and that the generation that her children had is indoctrinated into them as well. And she was just expressing how much more alive these things are than perhaps what we seem to sweep under the rug or ignore, because as you mentioned, a willful blindness, this isn't happening to me, so it doesn't matter. I bring that up because this thing is legitimate. Jim Crow, all these different segregation laws, all these things that the history of Black Americans have gone through. This is actually shortly removed. This isn't even how many years now? What was it? 60, 70, something
60.
like that's a very short amount of time. You know what I mean? And so these things are still very much alive. And the more that we're willing to acknowledge things for what it is, I think the easier we are on a pathway to actually healing as a people, as individuals, and as a whole collectively. But before you address other people, it is always important to address yourself, where you are, who you are, and what you're doing. Because you always looking through a mirror to see everybody else's crap, but ignoring your own, is a very self-defeating issue. And there's a reason. Well, I guess I won't use that one because that's kind of irrelevant. But anyway, focus more on where you are and dealing with your own heart and issues, and allow the transformations and inner heart transformation that only Christ can cause in you to shine so brightly that people who encounter you will feel as if they need a change in the same encounter with the same Christ, you know, and allow him to do the work in their heart while you're doing yours, and heal collectively, instead of always pointing out the finger and telling everybody else what's wrong with them, and never acknowledging perhaps some things that are at issue in your own life that is a hindrance to your growth, and not beneficial. So that's kind of where I'll park. We've definitely spent some time on this. There's so much to unpack. Of course, we're not going to hit it all, but we hope you guys landed somewhere with this conversation. I hope that it was beneficial to you as we continue to navigate everything around us, of course, from a biblical perspective. And man, if you like this video, make sure to like it, share it with a friend, subscribe if you're new, and turn on the post bell notification so you know the next time that we're posting pods, currently twice a week, and so much content that's going out in between, from shorts and clips and all those kinds of things, again, with our main goal to bring Christ to culture and engaging in culture, with all these conversations, viral clips, and topics that are to be discussed. We appreciate you guys oh so much, and until our next conversation, be easy and be breezy. Peace.
Peace.